The night was quiet, the kind of silence that wraps around a city like a blanket after a long day. Dr. Malcolm Rivers sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel tightly as he sped through dimly lit streets. His phone buzzed on the passenger seat, lighting up with another urgent message from the hospital. It wasn't just any emergency call, it was about the police chief's teenage daughter, who had been critically injured in a car accident. She needed immediate surgery, and only Dr. Rivers, one of the best surgeons in the city, could save her life. Dr. Rivers glanced at the clock on the dashboard. Every second mattered now. He pressed down harder on the accelerator, weaving carefully through traffic. The hospital was still miles away, but he knew the route well. As a doctor who worked late nights more often than not, these roads were familiar to him. But tonight, something felt different. The air seemed heavier, almost charged with tension, though he couldn't quite put his finger on why. As he turned onto a quieter street lined with tall trees and large houses, red and blue lights suddenly flashed behind him. Startled, Dr. Rivers checked his rearview mirror. A police cruiser had pulled up close, its siren wailing briefly before falling silent. Confused, he slowed down and pulled over to the side of the road. What could they possibly want? He hadn't run any stop signs or broken any rules, at least none that he was aware of. When the officer stepped out of the cruiser, Dr. Rivers rolled down his window and offered a polite smile. "Is there a problem, officer?" he asked calmly, his voice steady despite the growing knot in his stomach. The officer leaned down, shining a flashlight into the car. His face was stern, his eyes scanning Dr. Rivers' features with an intensity that made the doctor uncomfortable. "License and registration," the officer barked, ignoring the question entirely. Dr. Rivers nodded quickly, reaching for his wallet and the glove compartment where he kept his papers. "Of course," he said, trying to stay calm. "But if I may explain—" "You'll explain when I ask you to," the officer interrupted sharply, cutting him off mid-sentence. His tone left no room for argument. Dr. Rivers swallowed hard, feeling a prickle of unease creep up his spine. Something about this interaction didn't feel right. He handed over his documents, watching as the officer studied them under the harsh glow of the flashlight. Then came the first comment, a remark so casually cruel it caught Dr. Rivers off guard. "Fancy car for someone like you," the officer muttered, glancing at the sleek sedan parked neatly by the curb. Dr. Rivers frowned, unsure how to respond. Was this really necessary? He opened his mouth to clarify, but before he could speak, the second officer appeared beside the cruiser, joining his partner with an equally suspicious expression. Together, they loomed over the car, their body language aggressive and unwelcoming. "Listen," Dr. Rivers began again, leaning forward slightly to make eye contact. "I'm actually on my way to the hospital right now. There's an emergency. A young girl needs surgery, and I'm the only one who can do it. If we could hurry this along." His words trailed off as the first officer smirked, shaking his head dismissively. "Yeah, sure, everyone's got some excuse, don't they?" He flipped through the license and registration again, deliberately taking his time. "You think just because you've got a fancy title, you're above the law?" "Doctor," Rivers blinked, stunned by the accusation. This wasn't happening. Not now, not when lives depended on him getting to the hospital as fast as possible. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to remain composed. "Officer, please. I'm telling the truth. You can call the hospital. They'll confirm everything." Second officer chuckled dryly, folding his arms across his chest. "Oh, we'll check all right. But let's not forget what we stopped you for in the first place." He gestured vaguely toward the back of the car. "Broken taillight. Looks like you've been cruising around without even noticing." Dr. Rivers twisted in his seat to glance at the rear of his vehicle. Sure enough, one of the taillights appeared dimmer than usual. He hadn't noticed it earlier. How could he have? His mind had been consumed with thoughts of the patient waiting for him. Still, it was such a minor issue. Hardly grounds for this level of scrutiny. "This is ridiculous," he murmured under his breath, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. He reached for his phone, ready to dial the hospital and prove his story once and for all. But before he could unlock the screen, the first officer snatched it out of his hand. "Hands where I can see them," the officer snapped, his voice rising. "No sudden moves." "What are you doing?" Dr. Rivers demanded, panic creeping into his voice. "I'm just trying to show you." "Save it," the officer interrupted coldly. "We'll handle things our way." For several agonizing minutes, the two officers ignored Dr. Rivers's pleas, running unnecessary background checks and debating among themselves about whether to issue a ticket or escalate the situation further. Each second ticked by like an eternity, dragging Dr. Rivers deeper into despair. Back at the hospital, nurses scrambled to keep the young girl stable, unaware that the surgeon they desperately needed was stuck on the side of the road, powerless to intervene. Finally, after what felt like hours, the officers reluctantly returned, his documents and phone. They issued him a warning for the taillight and waved him off with a sneer. "Don't let us catch you speeding again," one of them called after him as he climbed back into his car. Dr. Rivers didn't respond. He simply gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white with anger and fear, and sped off toward the hospital. The delay had cost him precious time he might never get back. And as he drove, his mind raced with questions. Would he make it in time? Could he still save her? Or had this senseless stop sealed her fate? The weight of those unanswered questions pressed heavily on his shoulders as the hospital loomed ahead, its bright lights piercing through the darkness. Dr. Malcolm Rivers' car screeched into the hospital parking lot, tires squealing as he slammed on the brakes. He barely had time to switch off the engine before jumping out and sprinting toward the entrance, his white coat flapping behind him, like a cape. His heart pounded in his chest, not just from the adrenaline of running, but from the crushing weight of knowing that every second counted. The police chief's daughter was fighting for her life inside those walls, and he had no idea if he was already too late. As he burst through the automatic doors, the sterile scent of antiseptic hit him like a wave. Nurses and staff members rushed past, their faces tense with urgency. One of them spotted him immediately and hurried over, her scrubs stained with faint smudges of blood. "Dr. Rivers," she called out, relief flickering across her face for just a moment before it hardened again. "She's in critical condition. We've stabilized her as best we can, but she's crashing. You're our only hope." Dr. Rivers nodded sharply, his jaw clenched as he followed her down the hallway. His mind raced, piecing together what he knew about the case so far. The girl, a bright, promising teenager named Emily, had been driving home after a school event when another vehicle ran a red light, colliding with hers at high speed. She'd suffered severe internal injuries, including damage to her liver and spleen, along with multiple fractures. Without immediate surgical intervention, there was no chance she would survive. But now, because of the traffic stop, precious minutes had slipped away, minutes that could mean the difference between life and death. Dr. Rivers pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on the task ahead. There was no room for self-doubt or anger right now. All that mattered was getting to Emily and doing everything humanly possible to save her. When they reached the operating room, the team was already prepped and waiting. Anesthesiologists monitored Emily's vitals while nurses double-checked equipment and supplies. As soon as Dr. Rivers stepped in, the atmosphere shifted. Everyone looked to him, their eyes filled with a mixture of desperation and trust. He was the leader here, the one who had to make the impossible decisions and guide them through this storm. "Talk to me," he said briskly, snapping on a pair of gloves. "What's her current status?" The lead nurse rattled off the details quickly, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "Her blood pressure is dropping rapidly. We've given her fluids and started transfusions, but she's losing too much blood. Her oxygen levels are fluctuating, and we're struggling to keep her stable." Dr. Rivers nodded, his brow furrowing as he processed the information. Time was slipping away faster than he'd feared. "Let's move," he ordered, taking his place at the head of the table. "We need to get in there now." The next hour passed in a blur of activity. Scalpels gleamed under the bright lights as Dr. Rivers worked with precision, his hands moving with practiced skill. Around him, the Audib team operated like a well-oiled machine, anticipating his needs and responding instantly to his commands. Despite the chaos, there was a strange sense of calm in the room, a shared understanding that they were all fighting for the same goal. But even as Dr. Rivers poured every ounce of his expertise into the surgery, he couldn't shake the nagging, feeling that something was wrong. Emily's body wasn't responding the way it should. Every attempt to stop the bleeding seemed to be met with new complications. Her organs were shutting down one by one, and no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't reverse the tide. "We're losing her," one of the nurses whispered, her voice trembling. Dr. Rivers didn't respond. He couldn't afford to acknowledge defeat, not yet. Instead, he pushed harder, working faster and more intensely than ever before. Sweat dripped from his forehead, soaking the collar of his scrubs. But he didn't stop. Not until the anesthesiologist leaned over and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Dr. Rivers," the man began softly, his tone heavy with regret. "Her heart rate, it's flatlining." For a split second, the world seemed to freeze. Dr. Rivers stared at the monitors, watching the once rhythmic beeps turn into a single, unbroken tone. His stomach sank and a lump formed in his throat. They had done everything they could, but it hadn't been enough. Emily was gone. He stepped back from the table, his hands trembling as he removed his gloves. The room fell silent except for the sound of the monitor, its relentless drone echoing like a funeral bell. No one spoke. No one moved. Everyone knew what this loss meant, not just for Emily's family, but for the entire community. Finally, Dr. Rivers broke the silence. "Call it," he said hoarsely, his voice barely above a whisper. The anesthesiologist nodded and announced the time of death, marking the end of their battle. Emily's life had slipped away, leaving behind a void that nothing could fill. "Doctor." Rivers stood there for a moment longer, staring at the young girl on the table. She looked peaceful, almost as if she were sleeping. But he knew better. He knew that beneath that illusion lay the harsh reality of failure, a failure that gnawed at him like a relentless beast. If only he hadn't been delayed. If only those officers had listened. If only... Shaking his head, he forced himself to push those thoughts aside. There would be time later to process what had happened, to confront the anger and guilt that threatened to consume him. For now, he had a duty to fulfill. Taking a deep breath, he turned and walked out of the operating room, his shoulders weighed down by the burden of bad news. Outside, the police chief was pacing anxiously in the waiting area. His uniform was rumpled, his face pale with exhaustion. When he saw Dr. Rivers approaching, he stopped abruptly, his eyes searching the doctor's face for answers. Hope flickered briefly in his expression, only to die the moment he saw the look in Dr. Rivers' eyes. "No," the chief whispered, shaking his head in denial. "No, please." Dr. Rivers hesitated, unsure how to deliver such devastating news. "I'm sorry," he said finally, his voice cracking under the weight of emotion. "We did everything we could, but it wasn't enough." The chief staggered backward, clutching at a nearby chair for support. Tears streamed down his face as he collapsed into it, burying his head in his hands. Sobs racked his body, each one a raw testament to the pain of losing a child. Dr. Rivers stood there helplessly, unable to offer any words of comfort that wouldn't ring hollow. After several long minutes, the chief finally looked up, his eyes red and swollen. "What happened?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Why couldn't you save her?" Dr. Rivers hesitated again, torn between honesty and diplomacy. But then he remembered the recording on his phone, the video of the traffic stop that proved exactly why he had been delayed. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about exposing the truth and ensuring that something like this never happened again. "I'll explain everything," he said quietly, pulling out his phone. "But first, I need you to see this." He pressed play, holding the device so the chief could watch. At first, the man simply stared at the screen, confusion etched across his features. But as the footage unfolded, showing the officers mocking and delaying Dr. Rivers, his expression changed. Anger replaced grief, burning brightly in his eyes. By the time the video ended, his fists were clenched, and his jaw was set in a grim line. "This," he began, his voice trembling with barely contained rage. "This is why my daughter is dead." Dr. Rivers nodded solemnly. "Yes, and unless we do something about it, others will suffer the same fate." The chief didn't respond immediately. Instead, he sat there in stunned silence, grappling with the enormity of what he had just learned. His own department, the institution he had dedicated his life to protecting, had played a role in his daughter's death. The realization was a bitter pill to swallow, but it also ignited a fire within him, a fire that would soon spread far beyond the walls of the hospital. The next morning, the city woke up to a storm. Not the kind of storm that rattles windows or floods streets, but one that shook the very foundation of its social and moral conscience. Dr. Malcolm Rivers had uploaded the video of the traffic stop to social media late the previous night, accompanied by a short caption, "Systemic racism costs lives. This is what happened to me last night, and it cost an innocent girl her life." Within hours, the clip went viral. People watched in horror as they saw the two officers mock and delay Dr. Rivers, their prejudice laid bare for the world to see. Comments poured in from all corners, some expressing outrage, others sharing similar stories of being profiled or mistreated because of the color of their skin. The hashtag Justice for Emily began trending on every major platform, with thousands of posts calling for accountability and change. By sunrise, news outlets picked up the story, broadcasting it across television screens and front pages. Reporters camped outside the hospital, hoping to catch a glimpse of Dr. Rivers or someone connected to the case. Protesters gathered near the police station, holding signs that read, "Racism kills," and "No more excuses." The air buzzed with tension, a mix of anger, grief, and determination. Inside the police station, the atmosphere was no less charged. Officers whispered nervously in hallways, unsure how to react to the growing public backlash. Some defended their colleagues, insisting that the traffic stop had been routine and within protocol. Others remained silent, guilt weighing heavily on their shoulders. But none felt the weight more than Chief Alan Hayes, Emily's father. Chief Hayes hadn't slept all night. After watching the video Dr. Rivers showed him, he'd sat alone in his office, replaying the footage over and over again. Each viewing brought fresh waves of emotion, grief for his daughter, fury at the officers who had delayed her chance at survival, and shame for the system he represented. He couldn't escape the irony. The very institution meant to protect and serve had played a role in destroying his family. When dawn broke, Chief Hayes called an emergency meeting with his top brass. The room was tense as he entered, his face pale but resolute. Without preamble, he addressed the group. "We have a problem," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "Not just with those two officers, but with ourselves, with our culture. What happened last night wasn't an isolated incident, it's a symptom of something much bigger." He paused, letting his words sink in. Then, pulling out his phone, he played the video for everyone present. The silence that followed was deafening. No one dared to speak as the footage ended, each person grappling with their own feelings of discomfort and complicity. "I want answers," Chief Hayes continued, his tone firm. "I want to know how many times these officers have pulled people over under questionable circumstances. I want to know if this behavior is part of a pattern. And most importantly, I want to make sure this never happens again. Not to anyone." His announcement sent shockwaves through the department. Investigators were immediately assigned to look into the officers' records, uncovering a troubling history of discriminatory practices. Complaints from drivers of color had piled up over the years, ignored or dismissed without proper investigation. It became clear that the traffic stop involving Dr. Rivers wasn't an anomaly. It was business as usual for the two officers involved. Meanwhile, outside the station, the protests grew louder. Community leaders joined forces with activists, organizing marches and rallies to demand justice for Emily and systemic reform within law enforcement. Among them was Dr. Rivers, who reluctantly stepped into the spotlight. Though he preferred to remain behind the scenes, focusing on his patients and work. He recognized the importance of using his platform to amplify the voices of those who had long been silenced. At one such rally, held in the heart of downtown, Dr. Rivers took the stage to address the crowd. Thousands of people filled the square, their faces reflecting a mix of emotions: sadness, frustration, hope. As he stood before them, microphone in hand, he felt a lump rise in his throat. He wasn't used to speaking publicly, especially not about such deeply personal matters. But he knew he owed it to Emily, and to himself, to tell the truth. "This isn't just my story," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "It's the story of countless individuals who have faced discrimination simply because of the color of their skin. Last night I was stopped while rushing to save a young girl's life. Because of that delay, she didn't make it. Her name was Emily, and she deserved better. We all deserve better." The crowd erupted in applause, chanting his name and cheering for justice. Dr. Rivers went on to describe the events of the traffic stop in detail, emphasizing the need for accountability and transparency. "What happened to me isn't unique," he said. "It's part of a larger issue that we can no longer ignore. We must hold those responsible accountable, yes, but we must also work together to create real, lasting change." His speech struck a chord with listeners, inspiring even greater momentum for the movement. Local politicians scrambled to respond, issuing statements condemning the officers' actions and promising investigations. Meanwhile, journalists dug deeper, uncovering additional cases of racial profiling within the police force. The pressure mounted until it reached a breaking point. Finally, after days of mounting scrutiny, the 2 officers involved in the traffic stop were suspended pending an internal review. Their names were released to the public, sparking further outrage when details of their disciplinary histories came to light. Both men had racked up numerous complaints over the years, yet faced little to no consequences for their behavior. For many, this confirmed what they had suspected all along: the system was broken. In response, Chief Hayes announced sweeping reforms aimed at addressing systemic bias within the department. These included mandatory anti-racism training for all officers, stricter oversight of traffic stops, and the establishment of an independent review board to investigate misconduct allegations. He also pledged to increase diversity within the ranks, recognizing the importance of representation in building trust with the community. But perhaps the most poignant moment came during a press conference held by Chief Hayes himself. Standing before a sea of cameras and reporters, he fought back tears as he spoke about his daughter. "Emily was my pride and joy," he said, his voice cracking. "She had her whole life ahead of her, a bright future full of promise. And now, because of ignorance and hatred, she's gone. I failed her as a father and I failed her as a leader, but I will spend the rest of my life making sure her death wasn't in vain." He then turned directly to Dr. Rivers, who stood quietly, off to the side. "Dr. Rivers, I owe you an apology. You tried to warn us and we didn't listen. For that I am truly sorry. Your courage in exposing the truth has opened our eyes to the flaws in our system. Thank you for standing up even when it was hard." As the cameras flashed and microphones captured every word, Dr. Rivers nodded solemnly. He didn't seek recognition or praise. He simply wanted justice, for Emily, for himself, and for everyone else affected by systemic racism. And though the road ahead would be long and difficult, he knew that change was possible. Together with Chief Hayes and countless others committed to the cause, they would fight to ensure that no one else would suffer the same fate as Emily. The days following the press conference marked a turning point, not just for the city, but for Dr. Malcolm Rivers and Chief Alan Hayes as well. The momentum of the movement they had inadvertently sparked continued to grow, fueled by public outrage and an unwavering demand for accountability. Yet amidst the whirlwind of protests, media coverage, and political promises, both men found themselves grappling with deeply personal emotions that no amount of external validation could soothe. For Dr. Rivers, the weight of what had happened pressed heavily on his shoulders. Though he was hailed as a hero by many, applauded for his courage in exposing the truth, he couldn't shake the feeling of guilt that lingered like a shadow. He replayed the events of that fateful night over and over in his mind. The traffic stop, The officer's mocking tones, the desperate race to the hospital, and finally the devastating moment when Emily's heart stopped beating. Each memory felt like a knife twisting deeper into his chest. Every time someone thanked him or praised him for speaking out, he wanted to scream, "But I didn't save her." Instead, he forced himself to smile politely, nodding along as strangers expressed their admiration. Inside, though, he was drowning. How could anyone call him a hero when he hadn't been able to do the one thing he was supposed to do, save a life? His colleagues at the hospital noticed the change in him almost immediately. The once confident surgeon who walked through the halls with purpose now seemed distant, his eyes clouded with exhaustion. Nurses whispered among themselves, wondering if he would ever be the same again. Some tried to reach out, offering words of encouragement or inviting him to lunch, but Dr. Rivers declined most invitations. He didn't want pity. He wanted answers. Answers to questions that haunted him day and night. Could he have done more? Should he have fought harder during the traffic stop? Was there something, anything, he could have done differently? It wasn't until his closest friend and fellow doctor, Dr. Lisa Chen, confronted him directly that he finally opened up. They were sitting in the hospital cafeteria late one evening, surrounded by empty tables and the faint hum of fluorescent lights. Dr. Chen leaned forward, her expression soft but firm. "Malcolm, you can't keep carrying this burden alone," she said gently. "What happened to Emily? It wasn't your fault." Dr. Rivers stared down at his untouched coffee cup, his hands trembling slightly. "Then whose fault was it, Lisa?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "If I hadn't been stopped, if those officers had listened, I might have made it in time. I might have saved her." Dr. Chen sighed, reaching across the table to place a comforting hand on his arm. "You can't think like that," she said. "Yes, those officers made terrible choices, and yes, systemic racism played a role. But blaming yourself won't bring Emily back. What you can do is channel this pain into something meaningful. Use your voice, your platform, to make sure this never happens again." Her words struck a chord deep within him. For the first time since Emily's death, Dr. Rivers allowed himself to consider the possibility that maybe his role in this tragedy wasn't just about failure. It was also about opportunity. An opportunity to fight for change, not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever been wronged by a broken system. With renewed determination, Dr. Rivers threw himself into advocacy work. He partnered with civil rights organizations, attending meetings and rallies where he shared his story and called for reform. He testified before lawmakers, urging them to pass legislation aimed at addressing racial profiling and police misconduct. His testimony was raw and emotional, leaving lawmakers visibly moved as he recounted the events of that night and explained how systemic racism had cost Emily her life. At one particularly powerful hearing, a young lawmaker approached him afterward, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she said, gripping his hand tightly. "Your story has changed the way I see the world. I promise you we'll do everything in our power to make things right." While Dr. Rivers focused on systemic change, Chief Hayes wrestled with his own demons. Losing Emily had shattered him in ways he never thought possible. Every morning he woke up expecting to hear her laugh or see her smiling face, only to be met with crushing silence. Photographs of her lined the walls of his home, each one a painful reminder of the daughter he would never hold again. Yet even in his grief, Chief Hayes refused to let anger consume him. Instead, he channeled it into action. Determined to honor Emily's memory, he worked tirelessly to implement the reforms he had promised during the press conference. He met with community leaders, listening intently to their concerns and ideas. He visited schools and youth centers, speaking openly about his loss and encouraging young people to speak up against injustice. And perhaps most importantly, he held regular town hall meetings where residents could voice their frustrations directly to him and other members of the police force. These meetings weren't easy. Many attendees came armed with accusations and demands, their voices laced with bitterness and mistrust. Some accused Chief Hayes of being complicit in the very system that had failed Emily. Others questioned whether his reforms were genuine or merely lip service designed to placate the public. Through it all, Chief Hayes remained calm and composed, acknowledging the validity of their concerns while pledging to do better. "I know I can't undo the past," he told one particularly heated crowd, "but I can and will work every single day to ensure that no parent ever has to bury their child because of prejudice and neglect. That's my promise to you, to all of you." Over time, his efforts began to bear fruit. Trust between the community and the police force slowly started to rebuild, brick by painstaking brick. Officers underwent rigorous anti-racism training, learning how to recognize and address their own biases. Independent review boards were established, giving citizens a direct line of communication with law enforcement. And diversity within the ranks increased significantly, thanks to new recruitment initiatives aimed at underrepresented groups. Despite these successes, Chief Hayes knew the road ahead would be long. Change didn't happen overnight, especially when it involved dismantling centuries-old systems of oppression, but he was willing to take whatever steps necessary to create a safer, fairer future for everyone, including the children who reminded him so much of Emily. As the weeks turned into months, Dr. Rivers and Chief Hayes crossed paths several times at various events and meetings. Though their relationship remained professional, a quiet bond formed between them, a shared understanding of the pain and responsibility they carried. They often exchanged brief nods or words of encouragement, silently acknowledging the progress they were making together. One evening, after a particularly grueling town hall meeting, Chief Hayes approached Dr. Rivers as he was packing up his notes. "I just wanted to say thank you again," the chief said, his voice tinged with emotion. "For everything. I don't know if I've said it enough, but I truly am grateful." Dr. Rivers looked up, surprised by the sincerity in the older man's tone. "You don't have to thank me," he replied softly. "We're in this together, aren't we?" Chief Hayes nodded, a small smile breaking through his weary expression. "Yes, we are, and as long as we keep pushing forward, Emily's legacy will live on." In that moment, standing side by side beneath the flickering fluorescent lights of the community center, both men realized something important. While the scars of loss would always remain, they had found a way to transform their pain into purpose. Together, they were building a future where tragedies like Emily's wouldn't define a generation but inspire one instead. Months had passed since the night that changed everything, but Dr. Malcolm Rivers still found himself waking up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, haunted by memories he couldn't escape. The image of Emily's lifeless body on the operating table lingered in his mind like a ghost, refusing to fade no matter how hard he tried to push it away. He told himself repeatedly that he had done all he could, that her death wasn't entirely his burden to bear, but guilt is stubborn, and it clung to him with relentless persistence. Still, life went on, and so did the fight for justice. Rivers threw himself into his advocacy work with a fervor that surprised even those who knew him best. He became a fixture at community meetings, legislative hearings, and rallies, always armed with facts, stories, and an unshakable resolve. His speeches grew more confident over time, his voice steadier, his arguments sharper. People listened when he spoke, not just because of what had happened to him, but because of the passion and authenticity he brought to every word. At one particularly crowded town hall meeting, held in a high school auditorium packed with hundreds of residents, Dr. Rivers took the stage to thunderous applause. As he adjusted the microphone and scanned the sea of faces before him, he felt a strange mix of nerves and determination. This wasn't just another speech. It was an opportunity to remind everyone why they were fighting, to honor Emily's memory and prevent future tragedies. "Every day," he began, his voice strong despite the knot in his stomach, "I think about the young girl I couldn't save. Her name was Emily, and she was only 16 years old. She had dreams, big ones. Dreams of becoming an artist, traveling the world, making a difference. But we'll never know what she might have achieved because her life was cut short, not just by an accident, but by prejudice." The room fell silent, the weight of his words hanging heavy in the air. Parents clutched their children closer, tears streaming down some faces as they imagined losing someone they loved. Dr. Rivers continued, his tone unwavering. What happened to Emily isn't unique. It's part of a pattern of systemic racism that affects not just law enforcement, but healthcare, education, housing, and so much more. We can't fix everything overnight, but we can start by holding ourselves accountable, by demanding better from our leaders, our institutions, and each other. When he finished speaking, the crowd erupted into applause, many standing to cheer. A young woman in the front row approached him afterward, clutching a notebook filled with sketches. "This is for you," she said shyly, handing him a drawing of a dove taking flight against a backdrop of rising sun. "It's inspired by your story. Thank you for giving us hope." Dr. Rivers accepted the gift with trembling hands, overwhelmed by the gesture. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to feel something other than guilt. Gratitude. Gratitude for the people who believed in him, for the movement he was helping to build, and for the chance to turn tragedy into something meaningful. Meanwhile, Chief Alan Hayes wrestled with his own demons, though he rarely let them show in public. On the surface, he appeared stoic, focused, and determined, a leader committed to rebuilding trust within his department and the community. But behind closed doors, he struggled with waves of grief and anger that threatened to pull him under. Nights were the hardest. Alone in his quiet home, surrounded by photographs of Emily, he often sat in silence, staring at her smiling face and wondering if he could have done more to protect her. One evening, unable to sleep, he decided to take a long walk through the neighborhood where Emily had grown up. The streets were eerily familiar yet painfully empty without her presence. He paused outside her favorite park where she used to practice soccer drills late into the afternoon. Memories flooded back, the sound of her laughter, the way she teased him about being too strict, the pride in her eyes whenever she accomplished something new. Tears welled up, and this time he didn't try to hold them back. As he stood there, lost in thought, a group of teenagers playing basketball nearby noticed him. One of them jogged over, recognition lighting up his face. "Chief Hayes?" the boy asked cautiously. When Hayes nodded, the teen smiled softly. "We miss Emily. She was always cheering us on during games. We're sorry about what happened." Hayes blinked, taken aback by the unexpected kindness. "Thank you," he managed, his voice thick with emotion. "That means a lot." The encounter stayed with him long after he returned home. It reminded him that while Emily may have been gone, her impact lived on. In the lives she touched, the friendships she forged, and the memories she left behind. That realization gave him strength to keep moving forward, even on days when the pain felt unbearable. Together, Dr. Rivers and Chief Hayes worked tirelessly to ensure that Emily's legacy would be one of change rather than despair. Their efforts began to yield tangible results. New laws targeting racial profiling were passed, thanks in large part to Dr. Rivers' testimony and advocacy. Community policing programs flourished, fostering stronger relationships between officers and residents. And scholarships were established in Emily's name, providing opportunities for underrepresented students pursuing careers in medicine and law enforcement. One of the most impactful initiatives came from an idea Dr. Rivers and Chief Hayes developed. Together, a mentorship program pairing police cadets with medical professionals to foster mutual understanding and collaboration. The goal was simple yet profound: to break down barriers and build bridges between two fields often viewed as adversaries. Cadets shadowed doctors in hospitals, learning firsthand about the pressures and responsibilities of saving lives. In return, doctors attended training sessions with cadets, gaining insight into the challenges of maintaining safety and order in diverse communities. The program quickly gained traction, earning praise from both sides. Participants spoke openly about how transformative the experience had been. One cadet, a young woman named Maria, summed it up perfectly during a panel discussion. "Before this program, I thought of doctors and cops as completely different worlds," she admitted. "But now I see we're actually working toward the same thing, helping people. It's made me realize how important it is to listen, to understand, and to treat everyone with respect." Despite these successes, neither Dr. Rivers nor Chief Hayes allowed themselves to become complacent. They knew the work was far from over. Systemic racism was deeply entrenched, and dismantling it would require sustained effort across generations. But they also recognized that progress, no matter how incremental, was worth celebrating. On the anniversary of Emily's passing, the city held a memorial service in her honor. Hundreds gathered at the park where she used to play, bringing flowers, candles, and heartfelt tributes. Dr. Rivers and Chief Hayes stood side by side near the podium, united in their grief and purpose. As the sun set, casting golden hues across the sky, Chief Hayes stepped forward to deliver a eulogy. His voice trembled as he spoke, but his message was clear. "Emily was my light," he said, pausing to wipe away tears. "And though she's no longer here, her spirit continues to guide us. Through her, we've learned the importance of standing up, speaking out, and fighting for what's right. Let's make sure her legacy endures, not just today but every day." When he finished, Dr. Rivers placed a hand on his shoulder, offering silent support. Together they lit a candle in Emily's memory, its flame flickering softly in the evening breeze. Around them, others followed suit, creating a sea of glowing lights that illuminated the darkness. In that moment, amidst the shared sorrow and hope, both men realized something profound. While they couldn't undo the past, they could shape the future. And in doing so, they were keeping Emily's dream alive, one small step at a time. The months following Emily's memorial service marked a turning point, not just for Dr. Malcolm Rivers and Chief Alan Hayes, but for the entire city. The tragedy that had once seemed like an insurmountable loss began to transform into something else, a beacon of hope. Slowly but surely, the community rallied around the changes they had fought so hard to achieve, proving that even in the face of unimaginable pain, progress was possible. Dr. Rivers found himself reflecting on this transformation during quiet moments at work. He still carried the weight of Emily's death, but it no longer consumed him entirely. Instead, he channeled his grief into action, finding solace in the tangible impact of their efforts. Every time he saw a young student awarded a scholarship in Emily's name, or heard about a cadet learning empathy through the mentorship program, he felt a flicker of pride, a reminder that her life had not been lost in vain. One afternoon, as he walked through the hospital corridors, he noticed a group of teenagers gathered near the entrance. They were part of a local youth leadership initiative inspired by Emily's story, and they had come to volunteer at the hospital. One of them, a shy girl with glasses and a notebook tucked under her arm, approached him nervously. "Dr. Rivers?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. When he nodded, she continued, "My name is Maya. I want to be a doctor someday. Your story, it made me realize I can make a difference too." He smiled warmly, touched by her sincerity. "That's wonderful, Maya," he said, kneeling slightly to meet her gaze. "Never stop believing in yourself. If you work hard and stay true to your values, there's nothing you can't accomplish." Maya beamed, clutching her notebook tighter as if memorizing every word he said. Moments like these reminded Dr. Rivers why he kept going. While Emily's absence was a void that could never fully be filled, her legacy was alive in the dreams and aspirations of others. And in those moments he felt a glimmer of peace, a sense that perhaps somehow he was doing right by her memory. For Chief Hayes, the journey toward healing was slower but equally meaningful. He threw himself into his role as a leader, determined to ensure that the reforms he had championed became permanent fixtures within the department. Officers who had initially resisted the changes gradually warmed to them, especially after seeing the positive effects firsthand. Community relations improved, trust grew, and incidents of racial profiling plummeted thanks to stricter oversight and accountability measures. Still, Chief Hayes knew the road ahead would always require vigilance. During one particularly poignant meeting with his team, he addressed the lingering challenges head-on. "We've made incredible strides," he told them, his tone firm yet compassionate. "But let's not forget, real change takes time. It's not enough to simply implement new policies, we have to live them. Every day, in every interaction, we must prove to the people we serve that we're here to protect and support them. That's how we honor Emily's memory. His words resonated deeply with the officers present, many of whom had come to view Emily as a symbol of the kinder, fairer future they were striving to create. Some even began sharing their own stories of growth and reflection, admitting past mistakes and vowing to do better moving forward. These conversations weren't easy, but they were necessary, a testament to the power of vulnerability and collective effort. As the years passed, the ripple effects of Emily's legacy continued to spread far beyond the city limits. The scholarships, established in her name, attracted national attention, inspiring similar programs across the country. Young students from marginalized communities, once discouraged by systemic barriers, now saw pathways to careers they had only dreamed of pursuing. Many credited Dr. Rivers' advocacy and Chief Hayes' reforms for opening doors that had long been closed. One such student was Jamal, a bright young man from a low-income neighborhood who earned a full scholarship to study criminal justice. On the day he graduated at the top of his class, he invited both Dr. Rivers and Chief Hayes to attend the ceremony. As he stood on stage receiving his diploma, he dedicated his achievement to Emily, thanking her family and the mentors who had supported him along the way. Afterward, Jamal sought out Dr. Rivers and Chief Hayes, tears streaming down his face. "I wouldn't be here without you two," he said earnestly, "without everything you've done. Thank you for believing in people like me." Dr. Rivers and Chief Hayes exchanged a glance, their eyes shining with emotion. Neither man said anything. They didn't need to. In that moment, surrounded by graduates bursting with potential, they understood that their work was far from over. But they also knew they were making a difference, one life at a time. On the 5th anniversary of Emily's passing, the city held another memorial service, larger and more celebratory than ever before. This time, the focus wasn't solely on mourning. It was on celebrating the progress made in her name. Hundreds attended, including former skeptics who had since become allies in the fight for justice. Together, they unveiled a plaque in the park where Emily used to play, inscribed with a quote chosen by her father. "Her light shines on in the hearts of those who strive for a better world." As Dr. Rivers and Chief Hayes stood side by side, near the plaque watching families gather and children laugh, they shared a quiet moment of reflection. Neither needed to speak. Their bond, forged through shared pain and purpose, said everything. "You know," Chief Hayes said finally, breaking the silence, "there are days when I still miss her so much it hurts. But then I see all this." He gestured to the crowd, the vibrant energy of the community coming together. "And I feel like maybe, just maybe, we're doing okay." Dr. Rivers nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "We're doing more than okay," he replied softly. "Emily's dream is alive in all of us. That's something worth fighting for." And fight they did. Though the scars of loss remained, they served as reminders of the resilience and strength required to build a brighter future. Through their partnership, Dr. Rivers and Chief Hayes proved that even in the darkest moments, hope could prevail. Together, they ensured that Emily's legacy would endure, not as a tragedy, but as a testament to the power of unity, courage, and unwavering determination. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the park in hues of gold and crimson, the two men lingered for a while longer, savoring the quiet triumph of a battle well fought. The road ahead would undoubtedly bring new challenges, but they faced it with renewed purpose. After all, Emily's light still shone brightly, guiding them, inspiring them, and reminding them that the fight for justice was never truly finished.